Hello everyone. In this video I will show you how to automate the copy of data from Retable to Google Sheets. So this, as you can see on the screen, there is just few actions to do that in Procesio. So it will be quite simple. There are some tricks somewhere. I will show you where, but at the end it's like probably in 20 minutes you will be able to do that. So the first step of this process is, of course, to get the value and the data from your Retable. You store some of this value in a list, because the next step is to create a Python node and put some codes inside. So I know that it's defeating a bit the purpose of no code, but Procesio give you the opportunity to also run some Python or JavaScript code. And in this case, it's really convenient. It saves you a lot of other nodes that you would need if ever you didn't want to use some code. So this node will help you to clean the data and reorder them, because you will see in the next minutes of this video, you will see that my Retable column doesn't fit my Google Sheet column, so I need to reorder them. The next action is about storing the result of the Python code to a new object. And so then when you have all your data prepared, you just have to call the Google Sheet API to store your data and to post your data into your Google Sheet. So let's start by having a look at the Retable, that table that I have. It's a very simple one. I just have 3 columns and 2 lines. So first name, last name, and email. And I want to post this data, to copy this data in a Google Sheet. So let's open the Google Sheet. So it's empty now, and the idea, of course, is to copy the data from the table in these 3 columns. You note that the columns are not in the same order. So I start with email, first name, last name, where on my Retable it was first name, last name, email. Just to show you how to reorder the columns and the data that you're going to receive from your Retable API. So go back to our process. We see that the first action is about getting the value of Retable. So to do it, we need to call the API of Retable. So if we open the documentation of Retable, it's very simple to understand how to do it, as long as you understand the URL structure of Retable. But they have improved their documentation, and now it's very easy to understand. So when you open Retable, this one, the table, you see that in the URL there are 3 main ID, and here they explain what does it mean. So the first ID, and they are separated by slashes. The first ID is the workspace ID. The second ID is the project ID, and the last one that we need here is your Retable ID. So here, in my example, this is this data that I will need to fetch the information and all the data in the table. Okay? Because if we have a look at the methods that is provided by Retable to get all your rows from the data, so click on this one, you see that this is what you need. You need the Retable ID that we have seen just here. Okay, and of course, to be able to make this call, you also need to input your API key. So to get your API key, it's quite easy. When you are in Retable, you click on your profile icon. It will open this page with some of your data, and you click on API. And here, it is your API key. In this version 1 of the API of Retable, you don't have the possibility to regenerate your key or to create new key, so be careful to not expose your key. Of course, you also have to enable the key. It won't be enabled by default, so you have to enable it. And now that we have our API key, let's configure the first node of our process and try to get all the data of the Retable that we have here. Okay, so to do so, you put in the Canva a call API action. I have this already configured, so I will show you how it is configured. click on it, you give it the name that you want, and here you have to select an API, a credential, to connect to the service that you want to access, and in this context, of course, is Retable. So my credentials is already ready, and I will show you how it looks like and how to configure it. So I open the credential window here, and you see this is my Retable API. I click on it and I will show you how it is configured. So you give it the name that you want. I call it Retable API. It's a REST API. Click on next, and here it is how it looks like. So when you create a credential, you have to enter the URL, and if there is any authentication method, you have of course to also configure the authentication method. So if we go to the Retable API, and if we select one method, for example, the get rows method that is going to be interesting for you, you see that you have to put your API key in the header. Okay? So you select API key authentication, select header, and then at the key you enter API key, and from the value you copy your API key, clicking here, and you paste it in the value. If you want to make a quick test, a connection test to the API of Retable, you just select one of the methods that you want in this list. For example, I choose the get all workspace, because it doesn't require much parameters, quite easy. You just copy this and you put it in the endpoint. And if you test the connection, you will see that it's going to work. You have a 200 response, so everything is working fine. You can assign it, we close it, you can assign it to your API call. Okay, you select it, you have a list of API you have already created, so you select the one that you have created for Retable, and you can continue on the configuration. And it is how it looks like inside. So what we want is to get all the rows of your Retable. So to do that, you select the get rows method, click on it, and it gives you the format of this call. So you see that to be able to collect all the data of Retable, the only parameters that you need is the ID of your Retable. So you copy all this endpoint with the data included, and it's important to have this data information at the end. So you copy it and you put back in your endpoint. Okay, like this. I will do it again. Okay, and I will change my Retable ID here with the real Retable ID of my Retable. So as we discussed at the beginning, the Retable ID is this one. The first one is the workspace, the project, and then the Retable ID. So this table ID. So you copy it and you paste it back here in your configuration. And you have nothing else to do, because the headers with the API key is already configured in your credential. And the only thing that now you have to do is to set a timeout. So here it's 100. And also you can configure the status code if you want to be sure that you receive a 200 response or any kind of error. So that's interesting. So this is an integer. And what is more important here is to create the variables to store the output, to store the response of Retable. Okay, so here I already created my Retable I call it my Retable output object. If I click on it, you will have more information about it. So I give it the name Retable output. The type is object, and it is a single value. I configure it as an output just for debug purpose, but you don't care about this. And you save your variable. And that's all. Now we are able to test our action and see if you are receiving any data. So you can click on test action and text action button. So it will run and get the response. Okay, so we see that we receive a 200 status code, it is working, and we receive some data. Note that we have received the response of Retable in our Retable output variables. I will copy all the response and put it in an online JSON parser to understand the structure of the data. So I will copy all the data, copy and paste it here in this JSON parser. So I did it already. And this will help me to understand the structure of the data. So as you can see, we receive a JSON that starts with a data object, and inside this we have a rows, which is an array of other information, and you see inside that we have columns that looks like the columns that we want the information of the Retable columns that we want to process and then push to Google Sheet. So maybe here it's easier to understand. So we have the data, which is one JSON object. Then we have an array of 2 rows, and you understand that this is the rows in our Retable that you can see here, the 2 rows. And to have the value of all the cells, we have to look inside this columns array, which has 3 values, because we have 3 columns. So email, email, last name, and first name. And of course, we have the same in the second rows. We have another columns array with the email, last name, and first name.